So imagine you have spent 6 hours prepping for tonight's session. You've detailed how the economy in this village works. You know exactly where the blacksmith's great-granddaughter decided to go off. Your players, they enter the village. They interact with all of your plot hooks, your well-laid machinations, the evil mayor scheming behind doors, and they just blow past all of that. They just ignore it. They beeline, they say, you know, this is small potatoes, we just want to go see the king. Or they really decide to just take in something from their backstory and everyone's like, yeah, let's go do that. And they completely disregard like all of the prep that you have spent so much time and effort going into. Now, I've been there. I have been running this game since I was 11 years old. And if that's too young, yeah, probably. But it's taught me a lot. And over the years, I think that what I've found is that preparing your Dungeons & Dragons sessions shouldn't be something that feels like a second job to you. I think that we have an over tendency within the TTRPG community to either shoot how long we need to prep our D&D sessions for, or vastly undershoot that. I've seen countless videos on YouTube recommended to me lately that promise you that you can prep your D&D session in 15 minutes. And well, I think that there are people who can do that, and that's fantastic. I think that perhaps they have a bit more experience than their average audience member, or they're a lot more skilled at improvisation, or perhaps they might be cutting out some really key aspects of session prep that might be really useful. On the flip side, I'm really familiar with these old sort of 3.5 edition modules that tell you that you need to prep for 1 to 3 hours. Something that was really useful about those is for each section, they would tell you how long, for each category, 3 hours, 2 hours, or 1 hour, they actually had guidelines for how to properly prepare for that. But I do think that 3 hours, at least for me as a DM, is overkill. For some people, it might not be enough. And so I think what I'm proposing today is an in-between method. Today, I really want to give you my mental framework that helps me figure out what I actually need to hammer out the details for and what I need to prepare to improv for. So online, we see these sort of two tropes about dungeon masters play out. You have the first camp of dungeon masters who are novelists. What they really want to do is they want to write a book, and they want to control every aspect of the story. And as a dungeon master, I think there might be some anxiety that drives that, where they want everyone to have fun. And that's a great, good intention. That should be your goal as DM. But they think that the way to make sure that everyone has fun is to just make it so that they control every aspect. And that's not healthy, and it's not good, and it's gonna make your session prep take way too long and become just this massive sort of burnout center, and I can't recommend against that enough. The other camp that we see a lot of DMs online fall into, or at least videos that call out these kinds of DMs, are improvisers, or well, more like self-called improvisers. They think that they can just wing everything. They can skip session prep entirely. They think that they don't need to have plot points, story beats, or interesting things. They think that they can just react to what their players want to do and how their players want to do everything. And I don't think that's a very good way to go about it either, because I think that, well, I do see some people online saying that they want to play in a sandbox. Most of the players, if not almost all of the players that I play with and that I interact with and that I've DM'd for, prefer a little bit of linearity. They prefer to have a story. They prefer to work towards a narrative goal. And so when you're just reacting to everything, you kind of cut out a lot of that sweet payoff. And I'm not saying you can't have great moments, but I'm saying that there's an in-between method between the novelist and the improviser where you can really come together and create something really amazing. And so I call it the ABC framework. And let me explain what that entails. So as a dungeon master, I think that you completely control point A. Point A is where the characters start. It's at the beginning of the session, at the beginning of the campaign. You can use this framework for both. You control that entire starting point. Your goal is to prepare a couple of point Cs and maybe choose your favorite one. You point them towards those point Cs. Let me give an example of this. So, I have this campaign setting sort of inspired by ancient Greece meets Alice in Wonderland meets Grimm's fairy tales. You combine those three things together, it's crazy. The evil fairies and plotting politicians. Last time I ran this setting, the players had a blast. We had so much fun. Point A that I could control, I had them start at a royal wedding where a murder took place. Point C, later on down the road, I wanted them to not only solve the external conflict of invading armies and the fairies scheming behind their sylvan woodlands, but I also wanted them to solve the internal conflict of the scheming politicians and the traitors among the court. My goal as a dungeon master wasn't to take them from point A, this wedding starter, to point C and dictate exactly how they'd come from this wedding to taking down all of the different villains in the campaign. My goal as a DM is instead to facilitate this point B area in between. I believe that point B belongs to the players. It's your role as the dungeon master to fill point B with interesting NPCs, with great characters, with plots, with monsters, with challenges, dungeons, but it's not your role to dictate how they navigate themselves from point A to point C. That's up to the players to decide, and that's where player agency comes into play. I've described it as a minecart with a sandbox in it. And you can, for purposes of illustrating this metaphor, the minecart has levers that the players can pull to switch rails to. You control that point A, that starting point that the minecart gets pushed off from. As it travels along the rails, this sort of more linear narrative, the player's sandbox actually dictates how they navigate through it. They're pulling different levers, they're jumping rails, and they get to choose how they navigate through the world and which inevitable conclusion they end up at. And their choices help dictate what the conclusion to the session or campaign ends up being. I find this framework's really helpful because it helps me plan out not only the starting points, they have a really good foundation to start from, and not only a couple of different endpoints so I can adapt to match what the players decide, but it helps me know the different things in point B that I need to prepare. It helps me realize that I need to have a couple of really sharp NPCs. It helps me know that, okay, point C of this session, you know, they could have completed the dungeon, they could end up somewhere in the middle of the dungeon, or perhaps they got detoured or they needed to retreat out of the dungeon and end up back in town. So I plan out these couple of different point Cs for the characters to end up at, and then I can just sort of fill in, okay, what things in point B do I need to have ready? Yes, I'll need a dungeon map. Yes, I might need a couple of NPCs that are roaming the dungeons or that are in the town that gave them the quest. But it also gives me the adaptability to say, hey, I can completely respect the player's agency and allow them to go through this the way that they want to go through this. And I'm not forcing their hand, I'm not railroading them, and I can really improvise and both be prepared at the same time. And so that's why I think this framework's really helpful, really great, and can really help a new dungeon master or a veteran dungeon master. So a template that I follow to help make this ABC preparation work out to the best it can. First off, I start with point A. So I determine where the characters are starting, and I help set the scene, not only for myself, but then when we get started with the session, that helps realign expectations with the players. Step 2, I plan out 3 different point Cs, 3 different spots where they could potentially end up based on decisions that I think that they might make. Now this gets easier the more that you know your party, and it can be really helpful at the end of every session to ask them where they want to end up next session. That really helps you plan out. So I highly recommend at the end of every session, asking the players what the plan for the next session is going to be and helping them co-create with you. It's collaborative storytelling, and the best way to do that is to actually communicate with the players. Okay, number 4, after I've plotted out a couple of point Cs, my next question is, what NPCs are they likely to interact with? And I don't have to go super in depth. I don't need to write pages of backstory to the NPCs. Remember that your players don't care about the lore that they're not interacting with. They just care about the lore that's going to be, important to them. Nobody wants to just read through pages and pages, unless they're like enthralled with your world, right? Which could be the case. You could be George R.R. Martin, you could be J.K. Rowling, you could have that level of storytelling. This could be Elden Ring, this could be the next Miyazaki masterpiece, but odds are your players just care about the lore and history of your world as it relates to them and the story that they're telling together with you. That being said, to prepare your NPCs properly, you just need a name, you need something memorable about them. Maybe it's a way of speech, maybe it's something distinctive about how they look. You need perhaps a bit about their personality. And then for you as a dungeon master to properly roleplay NPCs, at least for me, what helps me and what allows me to improvise as the NPC is knowing what that NPC's motivation is. If you're roleplaying a village blacksmith, your motivation is to sell the characters their goods, right? If you're playing the local potion maker, your goal is to sell the players your potions. Can you tell that I've worked in sales? I just went for 2 references to selling your players stuff. The point is that your NPCs, you need a motivation for the NPCs for you to properly embody them. 5th, what I like to prepare is I like to prepare at least 1 combat, but usually what I do is I prepare a range. So I look at what I expect the players to do. So I have my point A, I have a couple of point Cs, and I decide, hey, given this, what are some likely combat encounters that are going to take place? And I plot out a couple of different ones. Now, it's not often that I force my players into a combat. I find combat very interesting, very exciting part of the game, but not everyone feels that same way. And I certainly don't think that every encounter that could be a combat should be a combat. I think that there are lots of opportunities where players should be able to talk around the combat, or the combat breaks out as a result of the player's decisions. I don't think it's really narratively interesting when they enter a room and the kobolds immediately get frustrated and pick up their spears and start attacking. I think it's much more interesting if the players fail to negotiate with the highwaymen and that leads to the highwaymen deciding to attack. So I plot out 1, 2, 3 different combat encounters, sometimes more. If it's going to be a really aggressive dungeon, or if there are a lot of different monsters that I'm excited to use, or that could be used depending on the environment that the players are in, I'll plot out a couple of different ones and I'll be prepared to adapt as the players make their way through that portion B. And then 6th, I like to plot out just a couple of scenes of what could happen. So if the players decide to go and interact with perhaps the land baron that they're getting rights to enter the dungeon for, maybe I'll plot out what that scene looks like. Maybe they come and they interrupt the baron's supper and they see a lot of local lords and ladies that are foreshadowed to be important later on in the campaign. Working their way into the dungeon, they're going to have to lower themselves on a series of ropes and pulleys and go behind a waterfall. And perhaps there's going to be a local earth elemental that sees them and decides to inquire what they're doing and maybe warn them about the dangers that lurk within. I'll plot out just a couple of these scenes and I'll drag and drop them in as necessary. I'm not here to force them into any one of these different scenarios. I just want to be ready to react to the players. And then the very last thing that I'll do to prepare for my sessions is all of the sort of extra fluff. Now, I'm lucky enough to play in a controlled environment where I've got screens and access to the internet, so I'm able to have a good Spotify playlist and throw up visuals of the monsters and NPCs that the players encounter, but you don't have to do any of that. That's all fluff. You don't need to have an extensive game board. Now I go and I buy out the pre-made battle maps. I also have a whiteboard and a dry erase battle mat, and I'm able to really customize the different locations that the players interact with. I've got a good handful of minis that we're able to use, but you don't have to do any of that. I've played in plenty of games and campaigns where we're using dice as our miniatures, where we're just drawing things out on a piece of paper, or I've played in entire campaigns that are just run on theater of the mind. My brothers and I used to play in the middle of the wilderness while camping all the time, and believe me, that was all theater of the mind. So it's definitely very doable. I think that we spend way too much time prepping those very minutia things. We're really just focusing on presentation there when we focus on the visuals, the sound, the miniatures, all of that. So I don't think that tons of time should be dedicated to that specifically. I don't know if this is a hot take, but here's my take on how long you should take to prepare. I don't necessarily think that 15 minutes is enough. I think that 3 hours might be too long, but that's for me. For you, it could completely vary. You might just need 10 minutes of session prep. You might need 8 hours of session prep. My advice is that you don't burn out from session prep. Session prep is some of the most meaningful time that you're gonna have as a dungeon master. It is so fun to be able to create and to plan out fun experiences for you and your friends to go through. It should never feel like a strain on your life. It should never take you away from more important things like spending time with your family, your work, your passions. Session prep should be really fun and really rewarding. So my advice is that you only prepare as long as it's fun and rewarding. You should, if it's way too daunting to plan out too many of those point B scenarios, maybe chop that up, make it more bare bones. If you feel that the point Bs that I've suggested aren't enough for you, take it a step further, plot out a couple of extra steps, but don't feel like you need to control the whole thing. Again, session prep shouldn't feel like a chore. It should feel like something that's just really fun and that engages you and that you're excited to do. So I really don't want you to feel like it shouldn't take you lots of time or that it should take you lots of time. I just want to set the expectation that it should be really fun for you and really rewarding. So session prep doesn't need to be a grind. It doesn't need to be a novel. You don't need to have a massive, 47 index card storyboard with the different layers interconnected. And it doesn't have to be super bare bones either. It can be something in between. You plan out that point A, you get your players' input on a couple of point Cs, and then you fill in point B with a couple of different opportunities. It's like stocking a refrigerator. The players can open it up and pick out what they want, and you come together and you make this delicious recipe. A bunch of cooks in the kitchen. You're just doing all the prep work. So if you thought this video was helpful, please drop a subscribe, comment, follow, like, all of that stuff. It'd be super helpful to me. I really want to make this channel grow. I'm Napoleon. This is NatNone. I'll see you at the next session. Thanks so much.